In the space of one evening, at a black tie gala in downtown Chicago, 4 different people insulted the same quiet man in an off-the-rack suit. A valet mistook him for the help and threw him his keys. A woman shoved an empty glass into his hand and told him to be quick about it. A man asked him, loudly, how someone like him had gotten past the door, and a 4th guest threatened, in front of a small crowd, to call security if he didn't move along. He absorbed all 4 the same way. Quietly, without heat, with a small kindness that none of them deserved and none of them noticed. The 5th person went further than any of them, and the 5th attempt was caught on camera by a 19-year-old server who had watched the whole evening and could not stand to watch it anymore. That video would be seen 11 million times by the end of the week. But not for the reason you think. Not because of what the 5th person did. Because of what the man in the off-the-rack suit did back, and because of the thing he was carrying all night in his jacket pocket, the thing not one person in that glittering room could see, which turned out to be the whole reason he was there, and the whole reason none of their insults could touch him. There is a children's hospital on the near west side of Chicago, and that November, it opened a new pavilion, a bright pediatric cancer center with a glass atrium 4 stories tall, full of light even at night. The gala to dedicate it was the social event of the season, 400 people in evening clothes under those glass ceilings, a jazz trio, passed champagne in real crystal. The kind of crowd where the getting seen was at least half the reason for coming, because a gala like this one is not only a gala, it is a market. It is where a certain kind of person goes to confirm their place in the order of things, who is seated where, who is greeted first, whose name the director says from the podium. The dedication of a children's cancer wing had become, for a good portion of the room, a competition about status conducted in whispers over crab toast. That is not cruelty exactly. It is just what happens to people who have spent their whole lives being told that mattering is a thing you win. Into that room, a little after 7, walked a man in a plain charcoal suit that fit him fine and cost almost nothing. He was unremarkable on purpose. No stylist, no entourage. His suit was fine, but forgettable. His shoes were comfortable rather than expensive, and he moved through the glittering crowd with the unhurried ease of a man who was not trying to be seen by anyone, which in that room read as not being worth seeing. His name was Marcus Rourke. If you had watched movies in the last 20 years, you knew the face, the quiet one, the reluctant hero, the man who did the hard right thing at the worst possible cost to himself, and who in real life was known for almost nothing except being decent. But nobody knew him that night, because he had made sure of it, and because he had his own reasons for being invisible, reasons that had nothing to do with modesty and everything to do with the folded piece of paper and the small die-cast toy car that were, at that moment, in his inside jacket pocket, over his heart. He kept touching the pocket. Not obviously, just a hand drifting up now and then to feel that the 2 things were still there. If anyone had noticed, they'd have thought nothing of it. Nobody noticed. They were busy noticing each other. He'd come to the coat check, and that was where the evening's insults began. The first one was the valet, out front, who took one look at the plain suit and the ordinary man and assumed, and tossed him a set of keys with a pull the gray Bentley around. Would you? We're double parked. Marcus caught the keys out of the air, looked at them, and handed them gently back. I think you've got the wrong guy, he said with no edge at all. But I hope you find him. And he went inside. The second was a woman in emerald silk who, 20 minutes into the reception, turned from her conversation and pressed her empty champagne glass into Marcus's hand without looking at his face. Another, and find the little crab things. They've disappeared. Marcus held the glass for a moment. Then, he found a passing server, set the glass on the tray with a quiet thank you, and murmured to the woman, "I'll see what I can do," and drifted on, and she never once registered that the man she'd ordered around was a guest. The third was a man by the bar, florid, expansive, who clocked Marcus's suit and decided out loud, to the two people beside him and loud enough for Marcus to hear, "You know it's really gone downhill when they let just anybody in. How does someone like that get through the door?" Marcus met his eyes, held them for a beat, long enough that the man's smirk flickered, and said evenly, "Good evening," and nothing else, and the not taking the bait was somehow worse for the man than any insult could have been. The fourth was the sharpest. A tall woman in charge of something, a committee, a table, herself, approached Marcus directly near the silent auction, looked him up and down, and said quietly, "So it wouldn't carry. I don't know who you're here with, but you're making people uncomfortable. If you can't produce an invitation, I'll have security walk you out. Don't make a scene." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. He had, in fact, an invitation in the other jacket pocket, the one without the toy car. He did not reach for it. "I don't want to make a scene," he said gently. "I promise you I don't. I'll stay out of everyone's way." And he stepped back into the crowd and left her feeling, obscurely, like she'd won something she hadn't wanted to win. 4 insults in 90 minutes. 4 people who looked at a man and decided, in the time it takes to blink, that he was no one. And the whole time, Marcus Rourke's mind was not really in that room at all. It was 3 floors up, in a room on the oncology ward that was empty now, where a 9-year-old boy named Eli Bennett had spent the last months of his life, and had died 6 weeks before, and whose name, though almost no one at the gala knew it yet, was carved into the wall of the very atrium they were all drinking champagne in. Marcus touched his jacket pocket again. The toy car. The folded note. He was fine. He could take 4 insults, or 400. He had learned from a 9-year-old exactly how little any of it weighed. The 5th person was named Cordelia Ashford, and to understand what she did, you have to understand that she was, that night, a drowning woman. And a drowning woman will pull down anyone within reach. Cordelia was 68, and for the better part of 40 years she had been the undisputed queen of Chicago philanthropy. If you wanted a hospital wing built, a library funded, a museum saved, you went to Cordelia Ashford. And she made it happen, and for a long time she made it happen for the right reasons. Because she genuinely loved this city and wanted it to have beautiful things. She had built the children's reading room at the public library with her own hands and her own Rolodex in 1986. She had done real good once, enormous good. But somewhere across 4 decades, the doing of good had curdled into the needing of credit. The love of the city had narrowed into a love of being the one who mattered in the city. And now, Cordelia was 68. And the world had done the thing the world always does. It had moved on. New money, new names, tech fortunes, and hedge fund wives who had never heard of the woman who built the reading room. The galas she had once run now ran without her. The seats near the center, which had been hers by right for 30 years, went to younger, richer, newer people. And that very night, at that very gala, Cordelia Ashford had arrived to discover that she had been moved. For the first time in 3 decades, her place card was not at the head table. It was at a table off to the side. Table 19. She had stood there holding the little card in the 4-story light and understood, with a horror that went all the way down, that her reign was over, that she had become, in the eyes of the room she had ruled, exactly the thing she had spent her whole life terrified of becoming. Irrelevant, forgettable no one. She had been marinating in that all evening, smiling her practiced smile, dying quietly inside, when a shabby, ordinary, invisible man drifted into her eye line near the auction tables. A nobody. A man the whole room had clearly already dismissed. And something in Cordelia Ashford, thrashing for any scrap of the significance she'd lost, saw a chance to be, one more time, the woman who decides who belongs. She did not do it quietly, the way the others had. She did it loudly, in the center of the room, in front of a cluster of the very people who had moved her to table 19. Because if she was going to be relevant one last time, she needed witnesses. "You," she said, and her voice rang out over the jazz. "Yes, you. I've been watching you skulk around this room all night in that suit, touching things, making everyone uncomfortable. This is a $4,000 a plate event for sick children, and frankly, people like you cheapen it just by being in the room. I don't know how you got in, but you are going to turn around and leave. Right now. Before I have you removed in front of everyone. Do you understand me? You don't belong here." The jazz seemed to stop. The nearby crowd went silent and still, and 19-year-old Sophia Reyes, a server who had been snapped at and ignored and reached through all night, who was working this gala to pay for the nursing degree she was earning so she could one day work on the very ward this pavilion had just replaced. Sophia Reyes, standing 10 feet away with a tray of empty glasses, quietly took out her phone and pressed record, because she could not watch one more person treat that gentleman like he was nothing. Marcus Rourke looked at Cordelia Ashford for a long moment. And here is what the camera caught. Here is the thing 11 million people would watch by the end of the week. He did not get angry. He did not pull out his invitation. He did not say his name, which would have ended it in half a second, and flattened this proud, frightened woman in front of the whole room she was drowning in front of. He looked at her, at the practiced smile cracking, at the trembling place card still crumpled in her hand, at whatever it was in her face that a man who reads people for a living could see and the rest of the room could not. And something crossed his face that was not fury. It was recognition. And then it was, of all things, kindness. "You're right that this is about the kids," Marcus said. His voice was quiet and gentle, and it carried in the silence. "You're right about that part. And I'm sorry I've made you uncomfortable tonight. That was never what I wanted." He paused. "I don't think you actually want me removed. I think something happened to you tonight that's got nothing to do with me, and you're carrying it, and I just walked into the middle of it. I've had nights like that." He held her eyes, and he said the last part so softly the camera almost didn't catch it. "It's okay. I'm not going to make this worse for you. Whatever it is, I hope it gets easier." And then he did the thing that broke 11 million people's hearts. He gave this woman who had just tried to humiliate him a small, sad, warm smile, and he turned, not to storm out, but to quietly step out of her way, to spare her the scene she'd threatened, to let her keep her dignity in a room that had already taken most of it. He was 3 steps toward the edge of the crowd when the microphone at the podium came on, and the hospital's director began to speak. "Before our dinner," the director said, and the room turned toward the stage, "I want to tell you why this pavilion exists, and I want to tell you about a boy named Eli." Marcus stopped walking. His hand went to his jacket pocket. The director told them about Eli Bennett. 9 years old. Diagnosed at 7. A boy who loved fast cars and old movies, and who, in the worst year of his short life, had written a letter to an actor he admired, not asking for anything, just to say that his films had gotten him through some hard nights, and how that actor had done something almost no one ever does. He'd written back. And then he'd come. And then he'd kept coming. Every week, for months. Quietly, no cameras, no press, no one knowing. Sitting in room 412 talking about engines and movies with a dying boy, right up until the end. That man, the director said, asked us for one thing, and one thing only. He asked that we never say his name in connection with this. He funded the naming of this pavilion in Eli's memory, and he asked to remain completely anonymous, and he only agreed to come tonight if we promised not to point him out. The director's voice thickened. I'm going to break half of that promise, and I hope he'll forgive me, because I cannot stand in this beautiful room named for that brave little boy and let his best friend stand in the back, unrecognized. He's here tonight. And I think some of you have already met him this evening. 400 heads turned, scanning the room, and found standing near the auction tables in a plain charcoal suit, the man that 4 people had insulted and a 5th had just tried to throw out, and the room realized, all at once, in a wave of dawning horror and recognition, exactly who he was, and exactly what he had been carrying, and exactly what they had done. Marcus Rourke took the folded note out of his jacket pocket and the small die-cast car, and he held them in his open hand, and he did not go to the stage, because that was never why he came. And Cordelia Ashford, at the edge of the crowd, holding her place card from table 19, understood that she had just tried to have thrown out, in front of everyone, on what she did not yet know was camera, a grieving man who spent his last free months sitting with a dying child, in the very room built to honor that child's memory. She did not run. She wanted to. She stood absolutely still, and she began, silently, to shake. Marcus found her 20 minutes later, after the room had surged and apologized and wept, after he had gently deflected all of it, in a quiet corridor off the atrium where Cordelia Ashford had fled to fall apart in private. He sat down beside her on the little bench. He did not say anything for a while. I didn't come here to ruin your night, he finally said. I want you to know that. I could have said my name out there. I didn't, because I didn't want you to feel the way you feel right now. He looked at her. A woman doesn't try to throw a stranger out of a room in front of everyone because she's cruel. She does it because she's drowning, and she's grabbing for anything solid. So what happened to you tonight, Cordelia? Before I ever walked in, what's the thing you were really carrying? And Cordelia Ashford, who had not told the truth to another human being in longer than she could remember, told a man she'd tried to humiliate an hour ago. She told him about table 19, about 40 years of the head table and the sudden public exile to the side of the room, about being 68 and watching a whole world she had built and ruled simply forget she existed, about the terror, the bottomless midnight terror of becoming no one. I built the reading room at the library, she said, and her voice cracked straight down the middle. 1986, with my own hands. Children still read there, and not one person in that room tonight knows my name. And I sat at table 19 and I felt myself disappearing. And then you walked by, looking like nobody, and I thought if I could just be the one who decides, one more time, that someone doesn't belong, then I'd still be somebody. She pressed her hand to her mouth. I made a grieving man feel unwelcome in a room built for a dead child, so that I could feel important for 10 seconds. My God. What have I turned into? Marcus did not interrupt. He let it all land. Then he told her something true. I spent tonight getting insulted by 4 people before you, he said, and it didn't touch me, and I'll tell you why. Because 6 weeks ago I sat with a 9-year-old boy who knew he was going to die, and who knew the whole world would forget him, and who was not afraid of it. Eli figured out something that took me 40 years to even glimpse. He said, Marcus stopped and opened his hand, and there was the folded note, in a child's careful printing. He said, "It doesn't matter if they remember me. It matters that I was here, and that it was good, and that you'll know." A 9-year-old told me that, and I've carried it in my pocket ever since, because it's the truest thing anybody ever said to me. Then he asked the question he'd come into that corridor to ask. "That woman who built the reading room in 1986, Marcus said gently, with her own hands, and didn't need anyone to know her name to do it, because she loved children and wanted them to have books. What do you think she'd say to the woman at table 19 tonight? Because I don't think you're the woman who needs the head table, Cordelia. I think you're still the woman who built the reading room. You've just been so scared of being forgotten that you forgot her." Cordelia Ashford put her face in her hands. That was the beat. The whole thing turned on it. "She'd be ashamed of me," Cordelia whispered. "She never needed her name on anything. She just built the room." "Then go build another one," Marcus said, and he stood and put his hand briefly on her shoulder. "I'm not asking you to grovel. I'm not even going to tell anyone what you said out there. As far as I'm concerned, it stays in this hallway. I'm just asking you to be her again. The one who does the good and doesn't need the credit. There are more sick kids upstairs than this pavilion can hold. That woman could do something about it. I'd help her." He almost smiled. "It's a better way to be unforgotten than a place card. Anyway, nobody remembers where you sat. They remember what you built." Here's the part the story usually skips. The slow part. The true part. The video went up that night. Sophia Reyes hadn't meant to make anything viral. She just wanted a record, some proof, in case that gentle man needed a witness. But someone she showed it to shared it, and by morning it was everywhere. And by the end of the week, it had been watched 11 million times. And here is the thing that surprised everyone. It did not go viral because of what Cordelia did. The internet, which loves nothing more than a villain to destroy, tried for about a day to make Cordelia Ashford the most hated woman in America. It didn't take. Because the thing people actually could not stop watching was the other half of the clip. The man absorbing the cruelty and answering it with kindness. The "I'm not going to make this worse for you," the small sad smile, the stepping aside to protect the dignity of the very person attacking him. That was the part that got shared with the little caption, over and over, "Watch how he responds." People sent it to their kids. They played it in classrooms. A man being publicly humiliated and choosing grace turned out to be a thing the world was starving to see. And Marcus did the thing that mattered most in the days after. When the mob came for Cordelia, he put out one short statement, the only public word he said about any of it. The woman in the video was carrying something that night that none of us could see. "I've been carrying something too. Please be gentle with her. We're all closer to a bad night than we think." And the mob, shamed by the target of its outrage refusing to be outraged, quietly let her go. Cordelia Ashford did not disappear after that. She did the other thing. Within a year she had raised, quietly, with her name on nothing, the money for 12 more beds on the oncology ward, and a fund to house families who came from out of town to be near their sick children, so that no parent would sleep in a hospital chair for lack of a room. She never sat at a head table again, and she found, to her genuine surprise, that she no longer wanted to. She had gone back to being the woman who built the reading room. She said, once, that a stranger she'd tried to throw out of a party had handed her back her own soul in a hallway, and she never even got to properly thank him, because he was gone before the night was over. Sophia Reyes, the 19-year-old server who pressed record, got a message a week later from a foundation she'd never heard of, offering to pay for the rest of her nursing degree, with a short note that said only that a good witness is a rare and valuable thing. She finished school. 3 years later, she took a job on the pediatric oncology floor of that very hospital, in the pavilion named for Eli, and she is, by every account, the nurse the frightened kids ask for by name. Years later, an interviewer asked Marcus Rourke about the video, the one everyone had seen. He looked, by all accounts, almost pained, like he wished they'd asked about anything else. Then he said, quietly, 4 people that night decided I was nobody, and a 5th one tried to throw me out, and none of it landed, and everyone thinks that makes me some kind of saint. It doesn't. It just means I'd recently learned, from a 9-year-old, exactly what's worth being upset about, and it's almost none of the things we get upset about. And he did not take the next question. He asked instead if they could talk about Eli. And they did. I have told a lot of stories on this channel, but I keep coming back to this one, and I've thought a long time about why, and I don't think it's the reveal. The director at the microphone, the room turning, the horror washing over 400 faces at once. That part's extraordinary, I won't pretend it isn't. That's the part we click for, but the part I actually keep is that he could see Cordelia drowning while she was the one attacking him. Think about how hard that is. Someone humiliates you in public, and every instinct you have screams to defend yourself, to reveal who you are, to watch them shrink, and instead he looked past the cruelty to the fear underneath it. In real time, in the worst moment, and he chose to protect the dignity of the person trying to strip his. Most of us can't do that when we're comfortable. He did it grieving, insulted, on camera. So here's the question the story left me with, and I don't have a clean answer for it. Almost everyone who is cruel to us is carrying something we can't see. A table 19. A terror of being no one. A bad night that has nothing to do with us, and that we just happen to walk into the middle of. And the great trick, the almost impossible trick, is to remember that in the moment it's happening, when they've made you the target. Would I have seen Cordelia drowning, or would I have just seen someone drowning me? Honestly, I'm not sure. Most of us aren't sure, but there's a 9-year-old in this story who figured out, at the very end of his very short life, that almost nothing we spend our days upset about actually matters, and that the only things that do are that you were here, that it was good, and that someone will know. Maybe that's the thing worth carrying out of that glass room. It fits in a pocket. I try to keep it in mine. This story is fictional, inspired by the quiet kind of decency the best people are known for. The kind that can see a person drowning even while they're pulling you under. If it got to you, do me a favor down in the comments. Don't just say great story. Tell me about the truest thing someone taught you, about what actually matters, or about a time you found out too late what a cruel stranger was really carrying. I read every one. They're the best part of this. And if you know someone who's been feeling like they're becoming no one, send them this. It might be the exact thing they need to hear today. If you're new here, subscribe. There's another story coming, and I'd be glad to have you for it. See you in the next one.